Hello everyone, and welcome back. It feels like just yesterday that we were talking about the announcement of Rogue Core, but we already have some more information to talk about. As with all Rogue Core related content, everything here is completely subject to change, it may not exist in the finished product, and as you'll probably conclude by the end of this video, this is all very early conceptual stuff. But it's still really cool, so let's get into it. Just a few hours ago, by the time you're watching this, Ghost Ship posted another Below Decks update. This time is about the concept art for the guns of Rogue Core, specifically the sidearms. Now there's 3 different weapon types that we can discern from the drawings and the descriptions that are given. First we have the Field Blaster, which is intended to be more of a wide area, sort of wall of energy barrier sort of projectile from what I can gather. Which is really interesting as it makes me consider that maybe there's going to be more projectile enemies in Rogue Core that potentially this weapon could counter. Just going off on my own little tangent here, I think that's a very interesting use for a sidearm to have it specifically be designed to block projectiles or push back enemies that might be coming up on you. Because even in DRG itself, there's really not many weapons that are specifically designed to counter projectiles, even though that is entirely possible when we look at things like Spitballers or even Dreadnoughts. Obviously this sidearm is going to have to do some damage as well, but it'd be really cool to see a playstyle that leans into shutting down projectiles, kind of like the Engineer's Short Circuit from Team Fortress 2. Next up we have the quote, precise, hard-hitting charge blaster. This one seems a little bit more milquetoast, something more akin to the coil gun designed to hit weak points. I hope it has a pretty fast charge up time, although I'd imagine it has to be slower than the other sidearms in order to justify it being the charge pistol. But regardless, I really like these concept designs, and they look like a much more aggressive version of the coil gun. But just looking at drawing B down there, it kind of has that same like chamber in it, like something that you'll load in between every shot potentially, and has a much more aggressive front end to it, and I really like the look of that. I hope the honeycombing design off the drawing A that would make it onto the final product though, as I think that's really cool looking. And finally we have the Shock Blaster. A gun I've always wanted to see in Driller's arsenal in DRG proper was some sort of electric weapon, something that would arc in between enemies. And I feel like that's what we potentially would have gotten instead of the sludge pump a long time ago. I definitely saw that suggestion a lot of times, although I don't think electricity in DRG would have performed that well as a primary on Driller, unless it was reworked to have a different impact. That being said though, this pistol looks like it would fall much more into that chaining electricity or electric AoE kind of projectiles or charge shots, as if we look at the one on the bottom right, drawing D, it very heavily resembles a Tesla coil, so that definitely looks like something you would just hold left click and everything in front of you would just get electricity arc to them slowly. But meanwhile, if you look at something like the top left, it looks much more like a weapon that would fire projectiles. It's got the same sort of tipping, this, I guess, barrel you could say, as the Drac. But that's about all there is as far as actual visual representations and notable differences between the weapons. But if I could just add on a little bit to what Friedrich, sorry if I butcher your name, is quoted as saying here, is that the weapons as they are being drawn are already functional in what is going to be Rogue Core as a game. The Field Blaster is already a usable weapon in Rogue Core, presumably just without a model or with some sort of placeholder model. So understanding the function of this and how it's going to play in the finished product has influenced the generation of the visual style. And I think that's a really interesting approach and way to look at things, because if you look at games that come out these days, there's often skin packs and massive reskinning and retexturing of weapons that are day one launch DLC before the weapon even realistically has made it into the player's hands, any playtesting or had any sort of identity given to it. So I can't speak to how often it actually happens in game development, but the idea that this weapon exists as code before it even has any sort of visual assigned to it is interesting to me, in the approach that the weapon as a concept influences the weapon as it appears. And knowing that about these weapons, that allows us to make some other inferences about the charge blaster and the shock pistol as well. But yeah, that's about all I have to contribute to this. Not very much, as art and artists are pretty far from my neck of the woods of just complaining about video games on the internet, so I won't overindulge myself pretending to know what I'm talking about. More than anything, I just want to show this process and kind of repackage some of these blog posts and potentially get them before the eyes of people that don't prefer to read blog posts. No offense to Ghost Ship, I'm really happy they're making these, but some people just don't read blog posts. Some people watch YouTube exclusively for all of their news on their favorite games, so you know, what can I do? Just trying to help. I'll leave a link to the blog post itself in a description down below. It's a very short read and a lot of interesting insight from the designer and how they actually go about creating things. Not just weapons specifically, but just how they gather ideas for these projects. Also, the visual imagery of a Danish man playing with a 1911 is pretty funny to me. But that's about all I have for you today. As always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Stupid spitballer, you made me look bad!